Thank you, Hadeen, for that wonderful introduction, and I'm honored to be here with you today. And we are particularly grateful for the early support of the Connor Center at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, as the lead scientific partner for the WHAM Collaborative. Although it might be true that I'm most known for founding and leading a company I built from my kitchen table into a global leading accessories brand, I always had a deep interest in the health and well-being of my workforce, 85% of which was women. Women were at the heart of my company, both as customers and as employees. My role led me to think a lot about the economic impact of women and to see that impact firsthand. I also saw the ways that health issues could impact women's finances and careers, the effect that an illness could have on someone, on their family, on their business, and it turns out, on our entire economy. When I first learned about the disparities in women's health research, it was all I could talk about. And well, here I am still talking about it. And what are we talking about when it comes to these disparities? Here's some of the data. Only 12% of Alzheimer's research, 7% of rheumatoid arthritis research, and 4% of cardiac artery disease research are allocated to projects focused specifically on women. How is it possible that scientific research could be so insignificant for half the population? As a business leader, I tend to look at problems with economics in mind. And I believe the solution to these disparities lies in the economics behind them. In my experience in the C-suite and the boardroom, change starts with data. And it became apparent to me that we lacked evidence. We lacked data about the economic costs, benefits, and social impacts of attention to sex and gender in health research. And that medical research gender gap is a major obstacle to not only achieving equity in healthcare, but to advancing the health and well-being of women around the world. As women globally drive the economy, that gap is holding us all back. Until now, to the best of our knowledge, no one had evaluated the economic consequences of the status quo, the costs we incur, and the benefits we leave on the table when research under-includes women. To change this situation in 2018, I shared this data with a group of businesswomen who I knew and respected to see if we could change this scenario. These incredible women were, like me, in disbelief when hearing the data, and frankly, they were immediately motivated to impact this situation.
We know today that almost every disease affects women differently than it does men, because we know that every cell in the body has a sex. Yet we still don't prioritize and invest in research that focuses on women.
Our research has found significant differences in the ways that men and women experience brain diseases.
We are basing our treatment paradigm on analyses and statistics that don't even apply to us.
I didn't know. I, of all people, should have known better. I'm an MD and a PhD and a woman, and I didn't know.
Why does there have to be a choice? Sex, gender, and race can coexist as significant variables within the same studies.
Sex differences research is not just a women's issue. It's good science.
This change is essential if we want to see precision medicine available for everyone.
No business would make decisions based on information that excludes 50% of its customers. We shouldn't either.
So we created WHAM, Women's Health Access Matters, a 501c3 to catalyze accelerated research and investment, and focused on 3 initiatives. The WHAM Investigators Fund, which makes awards to cutting-edge research that will transform women's health. The WHAM Collaborative, which brings together leading researchers at U.S. academic institutions like Brigham and Women's Connor Center, La Jolla Institute for Immunology, the Mayo Clinic, and the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health, who are all working to advance sex and gender-based research. And the WHAM Report. Our intention was to build the business case for funding research focused on women by asking, what are the economic impacts of increasing investment in women's health research? We commissioned the RAND Corporation, including Dr. Chloe Bird and Dr. Lori Frank, to begin a rigorous focus study to quantify costs and socioeconomic benefits of increased research funding focused on women. We chose 4 areas to study, which we knew disproportionately, exclusively, or differentially affected women: brain health, autoimmune immune disease, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. In November 2019, we assembled the members of the WHAM Collaborative, along with the WHAM Board of Business Leaders and our lead research partners at RAND, right here at the Connor Center, graciously hosted by Dr. Hadeen Jaffe. A year and a half later, it's wonderful to have some answers to these questions and be able to share them with you. Behind all of the work that went into the research were some simple but crucial facts that we kept at the front of our minds. Women are the majority of the US population, nearly 50% of the workforce, and control over 60% of personal wealth. In the US, women are responsible for over 85% of consumer spending, more than $11 trillion. Women make over 80% of healthcare decisions in the US. And as the global CEO of a brand, I saw firsthand how women drive the economy. I also know from experience that when women are pulled from the workforce because of inadequate treatment options or to care for their families, there are direct economic consequences for our businesses and our economy. I am not a scientist or a physician, and I don't need to be one to tell you that male and female bodies are different, and that the differences go way beyond our reproductive organs. Just consider how those differences manifest in health outcomes. Women are more than twice as likely as men to suffer from depression. They're 2 times as likely as non-smoking men to get lung cancer. Women are 80% of all patients with autoimmune conditions, 2/3 of all patients with Alzheimer's disease, and 50% more likely to die within the year following a heart attack than men. We figured out and we know that these differences and disparities exist. We can see it in the data when we bother to look. But collectively, as a society, we still do not understand why. The NIH only began to ensure the inclusion of women in all clinical research after an act of Congress in 1993. And it was only 5 years ago, in 2016, that the NIH began requiring studies to use female mice and animal cells in research. These delays have left us all with an impoverished evidence base about women's health. And the impact is far-reaching. It means when it comes to keeping our economy healthy, we are often using analysis and data that doesn't even apply to half the population, the driving force and engines of the global economy. The analysis and the data matters. Women are disproportionately and differentially impacted by some of the costliest diseases we face. We need more research dollars and investment in companies focused on prevention, diagnosis, and treatment on diseases in which women are disproportionately affected. Cardiac artery disease costs our economy over $555 billion a year. Women have worse outcomes than men, but only 4% of total research funding focuses specifically on women. Alzheimer's disease cost our economy $305 billion in 2020. Women are 66% of the patients, but only 12% of total research funding focuses specifically on women. Rheumatoid arthritis costs our economy over $40 billion a year. Women are 60% of the patients, but only 7% of research funding focuses specifically on women. But here's some good news. It turns out women's health research isn't just good science. It's a good investment and yields far higher rates of return than general research. The WHAM report finds a higher rate of return for research focused on women across our initial disease areas: cardiovascular disease, autoimmune, and Alzheimer's disease, driving billions of dollars to the economy through greater quality of life, workforce, and economic gains and reduced healthcare costs. The WHAM report shows us powerful information across 3 very different research areas. We can see clearly that this issue is not limited to one space. If we implemented the findings in the WHAM report together, we would invest a little over $300 million and get back over $13 billion. Doubling women's Alzheimer's research pays for itself 3 times over. And adding $280 million generates $930 million in economic returns, a 224% return on investment. That's a 15% higher return than we get for general research. For every dollar invested, we get back $2 in quality of life improvements and $1.24 in healthcare cost savings. We haven't yet released the full findings from our cardiovascular and autoimmune research, which we will do in the fall. But I'll preview the results here for you. They are significantly larger than the ADRD report released in May. When we double investment for women's heart research, every dollar generates $95 to the economy. And from rheumatoid arthritis, every dollar generates over $1,700. And that makes perfect sense. When you think about it, heart and autoimmune disease take women out of the workforce much earlier on average than Alzheimer's. Doubling women's cardiac artery disease research pays for itself 100 times over. Adding a $20 million investment generates nearly $2 billion in economic return, a 9,500% return on investment. Doubling women's rheumatoid arthritis research pays for itself 1,750 times over. Doubling the RA funding focused on women, adding $6 million, produces $10.5 billion in economic benefits and over 174,000% return on investment. These startling returns are the reason why the WHAM report was created, to share this important data with researchers, economists, funders, entrepreneurs, advocates, policymakers, and business leaders. We are bringing together leaders across these disciplines to find new opportunities and to create real change in the status quo. And we're very grateful to the RAND Corporation for their year-long effort in identifying this data. Later today, you will hear a keynote from Susan Hockfield about her collaboration in the Boston Biotech Working Group, known as the BBWG. Like WHAM, BBWG seeks to use data to drive change. It is difficult for us all to see how slowly change has been made for women in science, whether as investment in women's health research or in positions of leadership at their institutions. And it still stuns me to know that less than 3% of VC dollars are given to women. The WHAM report shows us that fixing disparities in health research by increasing investment is in our best interest, not only for our health, but for our economy. WHAM and BBWG and other small groups of passionate and courageous women and men will create and change the status quo. And the WHAM report can be a catalyst to support the aggressive change we all seek. We've just talked through some powerful returns in big numbers. But what does having this data really mean? And how will it change our investment in women's health? Let me restate the framework that was behind all of the work that went into this research. Women are the majority of the US population, nearly 50% of the workforce, and control over 60% of personal wealth. In the US, women are responsible for over 85% of consumer spending, more than $11 trillion. Women make over 80% of healthcare decisions in the US. So I would ask you, how can we continue to make decisions based on information that excludes most of our population, half our workforce, 2/3 of our wealth holders, and nearly all of our spenders? We can't, and we shouldn't. No CEO looking at this data could argue to blindly continue with the status quo, because no business could afford it. Nor can we, as morally and ethically responsible individuals, turn away from these facts. Beyond quantifying costs and benefits, the WHAM report is an accountability index for change. Our vision is that the WHAM report offers you a new platform, a new roadmap to inspire the kind of lasting change we all know is right for the durable prosperity and well-being of our society.
I think the most important takeaway from this research and from the WHAM report is that we were able to demonstrate that the cost of business as usual, of continuing to fund where most studies don't answer questions about whether and to what extent the findings differ for women, that underinvestment in women's health means we aren't doing as well by women. And when we increase the funding in research on the health of women, we can improve lives. We can reduce the prevalence of disease. We can slow progression of disease. We can improve health-related quality of life. And we took into account the extent to which research would benefit men and benefit women. And we have a much higher return on the science and the investment in science when we increase the amount of funding for research on the health of women.
How will you use this data? How might it change your thinking and your actions? Thank you for inviting me to share WHAM with you.